Have you ever buried a piece of yourself just to keep the peace? I'm Serafina Wells, 34, and for 8 long years, I let my family believe I was nothing more than an office assistant, fetching coffee, filing papers, living in the shadows. I carried a secret that burned inside me, one I hid to avoid their judgment, their envy. But secrets have a way of breaking free, don't they? At my sister Isolde's engagement party, everything I'd held back came crashing down in a single, shattering moment. One word changed my life forever. Picture this, a glittering engagement party, my sister Isolde basking in the spotlight, her diamond ring catching every eye. She mocked me in front of everyone, dismissing me as the family failure, the coffee girl. But her fiancé, Gideon, a sharp defense attorney, froze mid-sentence. His eyes locked on mine, recognition dawning. "You're the judge," he said, his voice cutting through the chatter. That one word silenced the room, unraveling years of lies and unspoken hurts. My family's world turned upside down, and the truth I'd hidden for so long finally stepped into the light. That single word, judge, shattered the facade I'd built to keep my family comfortable. It exposed a lifetime of being overlooked, underestimated, by the people who should have known me best. If you've ever felt invisible, like your achievements were brushed aside, you'll understand the weight of that moment. Stay with me until the end to see how my family unraveled, how secrets spilled out, and how we found a way forward. This isn't just my story, it's for anyone who's ever dimmed their light to avoid outshining someone else. Have you ever hidden your true self? I'd love to know. If this resonates, hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey. Your story matters, and I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments below. Growing up, my sister Isolde always stole the spotlight. Even when I earned my moment, like the time I won a mock trial award, she'd swoop in, her latest victory drowning mine out. I learned early to stay small, to avoid her shadow. But that night at her engagement party, everything changed. The truth I'd buried for years broke free, and it reshaped our family forever. Stick around to see how. I grew up in a sprawling colonial house in suburban Philadelphia, where the air always carried the scent of freshly cut grass and my mother's rose garden. My parents, Thaddeus and Cornelia Wells, built a comfortable life for us, upper middle class, with summers at the shore and winters by the fireplace. But in that house, my sister Isolde, 6 years older, was the heartbeat of our family. She was the kind of person who filled every room with her laughter, her stories, her presence. To my parents, she was a comet streaking across their sky, dazzling and impossible to ignore. Me? I was Serafina, the quiet one, always tucked into a corner with a book, watching the world orbit around her. Our home was a stage, and Isolde was the star, her every achievement a headline in the Wells family newsletter. I loved her, but loving someone doesn't mean you don't feel the weight of their shadow. That shadow shaped me, taught me early that some lights burn brighter, and mine was meant to flicker softly in the background. Isolde was a force, a whirlwind of confidence and charm that swept everyone along. At 7, she'd twirl in her ballet recital, the audience clapping like she was a Broadway star. By 12, she was captain of the debate team, her sharp tongue winning trophies that lined our living room shelves. When she got into college with 3 scholarships, my father, Thaddeus, called every relative to brag, his voice thick with pride. My mother, Cornelia, would beam, telling neighbors, Isolde's destined for greatness. Every milestone was a family event, parties for her dance solos, dinners for her academic awards. I'd sit at those gatherings, watching her soak up the applause, her smile radiant under the glow of their adoration. She wasn't cruel, not then. She'd hug me, say, "Serafina, you'll shine one day." But those words felt like pity, a pat on the head for the little sister who didn't demand the spotlight. I remember her high school talent show, where she sang a ballad so beautifully the crowd stood. I'd practiced a poem for weeks, but my slot was cut for time. Next year, Mom said, but Isolde's performance was all anyone talked about. Her light wasn't just bright, it was blinding, and I learned to stay out of its glare to avoid being burned. I wasn't invisible, not entirely, but my victories were quiet, easily drowned out by Isolde's fanfare. At 13, I brought home a perfect report card, my heart racing with pride. I laid it on the kitchen table, waiting for my parents to notice. That same day, Isolde won a regional dance competition, and the house erupted in celebration. "Nationals," my mother exclaimed, hugging her. My report card sat untouched, forgotten under a pile of her medals. "Isolde needs more attention," Cornelia would tell her friends. "Serafina's the easy one." Easy. That word stung, like my efforts were less because they came without a fuss. My mock trial awards, my honor roll plaques, they were acknowledged with a nod, a quick, "Good job, dear," before the conversation swung back to Isolde's latest triumph. Once, I won a statewide essay contest, my words printed in a local paper. I showed it to Dad, hoping for a spark of pride. "That's nice," he said, distracted, as Isolde called to announce her internship. My achievements felt like whispers in a house full of shouts. I stopped expecting their praise, burying my hurt deep, where it hardened into a resolve to prove myself, not to them, but to me. By high school, I'd built a wall around my heart, seeking validation in places my family couldn't touch. I joined the mock trial team, where I found my voice, sharp and steady, arguing cases in front of judges. The law captivated me, its logic, its fairness, the way it gave order to chaos. When I announced I wanted to go to law school, my parents hesitated. "It's so competitive, Serafina," my father warned. And the debt, no such doubts were voiced when Isolde pursued her marketing degree. Their caution hurt, but it fueled me. I worked harder, earned a scholarship to UPenn Law, and poured myself into my studies. I didn't need their spotlight, I'd make my own. I'll never forget Isolde's high school graduation, a day that still stings. The family gathered for photos, Thaddeus, Cornelia, Isolde in her cap and gown, smiling like she'd conquered the world. I stood off to the side, my new debate trophy clutched in my hands, waiting to be included. "Just the graduate," Mom said, waving me away. I watched them pose, laughter echoing, while I faded into the background. That moment crystallized my place in our family, always the afterthought, never the focus. It pushed me deeper into my own world, where I could succeed without their approval. Mock trial became my sanctuary, where I wasn't Isolde's little sister but Serafina Wells, a force in my own right. Those late nights practicing, the thrill of winning my first case, they built a confidence I'd never felt at home. Law school was my rebellion, a quiet one, against a family that couldn't see me. I carried that graduation photo in my mind, a reminder that my worth wasn't tied to their praise. I was forging my path, even if it meant walking it alone. After high school, I threw myself into law school at UPenn, chasing a dream my family barely acknowledged. The law was my refuge, a world where logic and justice held sway, where I could be more than Isolde's quiet little sister. At 26, I landed a clerkship with Judge Thompson, a towering figure in the Eastern District Court. My days were a whirlwind of legal briefs, late-night research, and courtrooms humming with tension. I thrived there, drafting memos that shaped rulings, learning the weight of every word in a case. It was thrilling, like stepping into a role I was born to play. But my family? They had no clue. To them, I was still Serafina, the one who faded into the background, not someone wielding power in a courtroom. I remember my first day clerking, standing outside the courthouse, heart pounding with pride. I called my mom, hoping to share it. "That's nice," she said, distracted, asking if I'd seen Isolde's latest marketing campaign. That stung, but I swallowed it, vowing to keep my world separate. I didn't need their validation, not yet. I poured my soul into the work, analyzing cases, debating with colleagues, feeling my confidence grow. Each late night at the courthouse was a step away from the girl who'd stood in Isolde's shadow. Law school and that clerkship weren't just a career, they were my rebellion, my way of claiming a space where I could shine, even if no one at home could see it. 8 years ago, at a Thanksgiving dinner, the lie that would define me took root. The table was crowded with relatives, plates piled high with turkey and cranberry sauce, laughter filling the air. I mentioned I was assisting Judge Thompson, hoping to hint at my clerkship's importance. Before I could elaborate, Aunt Vesper chimed in, her voice dripping with sympathy. An administrative assistant? That's honest work, Serafina. Not everyone needs a big career. The table nodded, assuming I was fetching coffee, filing papers. Then Isolde leaned forward, her smile sharp as a blade. Serafina's working for some judge, getting his coffee. We all start somewhere, don't we? Her words cut deep, but her eyes held a challenge, daring me to contradict her. I froze, my throat tight. I could have set them straight, told them I was drafting legal opinions, not making lattes. But I was exhausted from years of being the afterthought, from fighting for a scrap of their attention. So I let it go. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile, something like that. That night, lying awake, I replayed their pitying looks, Isolde's smug tone. I'd won a mock trial award just weeks before, but no one asked about it. The lie felt easier than the truth, a shield against their indifference. I didn't realize then how that moment would lock me into silence, how it would grow into a secret I'd carry for years, a secret that protected me but also kept me invisible, even to myself. That Thanksgiving lie became my armor. I threw myself deeper into my career, determined to prove my worth, if only to myself. As a prosecutor, I stood in courtrooms, facing defendants, arguing cases with a fire I'd never shown at home. I won nearly every case, my name whispered among colleagues as a rising star. At 32, I was appointed the youngest judge in the Eastern District Court in decades, a milestone that landed me in legal journals. Strangers praised my rulings, but at family dinners, I was still the coffee girl, nodding along as Isolde boasted about her marketing deals. I'd sit there, silent, my robes and gavel a world away. I'd walk into court each morning, feeling the weight of the bench, the trust in my decisions. Once, a colleague called me Your Honor in a packed courtroom, and I felt a surge of pride I couldn't share with my parents. Keeping my success hidden was my choice, but it was heavy. Every family gathering, I'd brace for questions about my admin job, dodging with vague answers. The secrecy was a wall I built, not just against their judgment but against my own fear, that even if I told them, they wouldn't care. Yet in those quiet moments, alone with my case files, I knew I was building something real, something mine. The law was my truth, even if my family couldn't see it. In my first year as a judge, I sentenced a man who'd stolen from his employer to feed his family. His eyes met mine, full of regret, and I saw a chance for redemption. Probation, I ruled, my voice steady, heart racing. From the gallery, Judge Thompson, my old mentor, gave a small nod, a rare sign of approval. That moment was mine, untouchable by my family's indifference. It was proof I'd built a life beyond their shadows. Another memory stands out, a late-night case review, papers strewn across my desk, the courthouse silent. I'd ruled on a complex fraud case, balancing justice with mercy, and felt a quiet power I'd never known at home. Those moments anchored me, but they also deepened my silence. Why didn't I tell my family? Part of me wanted to scream the truth, to make them see the judge I'd become. But another part, the little girl who'd stood outside their praise, feared it wouldn't matter. What if I told them, and they just shrugged? That fear kept me quiet, locked in a secret that was both my strength and my burden. For 8 years, I hid my light, not because I doubted it, but because I couldn't trust them to see it. The law gave me purpose, a place where I was enough. But as I sat at those family dinners, smiling through their assumptions, I wondered how long I could carry the weight of a truth they'd never understand. Isolde's engagement party was a spectacle, a dazzling display of everything she was, bold, radiant, impossible to ignore. My parents' Philadelphia home, a grand colonial with ivy climbing its walls, was transformed into a fairy tale. Strings of golden lights crisscrossed the backyard, casting a warm glow over tables draped in crisp white linen. Bouquets of peonies and roses spilled from crystal vases, their perfume mingling with the summer air. A massive banner hung above the patio, proclaiming, "Congratulations Isolde and Gideon," in elegant script, as if the world needed reminding who this night was for. Waiters glided through the crowd, offering champagne flutes and delicate canapés, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. Every detail screamed perfection, curated to reflect Isolde's vision of herself as the center of the universe. I stood by the edge of the lawn, watching guests arrive, old family friends, distant cousins, colleagues of my parents, Thaddeus and Cornelia, all drawn into Isolde's orbit. They whispered about her latest successes, her charm, her beauty, as if she were a celebrity gracing us with her presence. For a moment, I envied her ease, her ability to command love and admiration without trying. But envy gave way to a familiar ache, the kind that had followed me since childhood, a reminder that this was her stage, not mine. I was 34, a judge in one of the most prestigious courts, yet here, I was just Serafina, the quiet Wells sister, expected to blend into the backdrop of Isolde's triumph. I arrived early, as always, to help set up, hoping maybe this time my efforts would be seen. But the house was already buzzing with my mother's frantic energy. Cornelia darted around, adjusting floral arrangements, her voice sharp as she called out orders. "Serafina, move those peonies, they're off-center. Isolde wants everything flawless." My father, Thaddeus, was outside, teetering on a ladder, stringing up more lights because Isolde insisted on a magical glow. I nodded, swallowing the familiar sting of being an afterthought, and set to work at the party. I arranged champagne glasses in precise rows, polished silverware until it gleamed, tasks so small they felt invisible, like me. As I worked, I caught snippets of Mom's phone call with Isolde, her voice softening in a way it never did for me. "Don't worry, darling, it's all perfect for you." I paused, a glass in hand, remembering a family picnic years ago when I'd organized games for the cousins, only for Isolde to swoop in and take credit. Back then, I'd cried. Now, I just kept moving. Guests began to trickle in, their chatter filling the air, but no one noticed the glasses I'd arranged or the napkins I'd folded. I stood by the drink station, pouring wine, my smile practiced but hollow. At 34, I was a judge who'd sentenced criminals, yet here, I was reduced to a servant in my sister's pageant, my worth measured in tasks no one would thank me for. The ache grew heavier, a quiet question forming, would I ever be more than this to them? As the party swelled, relatives I hadn't seen in years approached me, their faces familiar yet distant, like faded photographs. Uncle Roland, with his booming voice, clapped me on the shoulder. "Still filing papers at the courthouse, Serafina? Steady work, good for you." Aunt Vesper pulled me into a hug, her perfume overwhelming, and whispered, "Don't worry, dear, you'll find your path someday." Their words were kind, but they cut like knives, each one assuming I was stuck in a dead-end job, a failure next to Isolde's dazzling career. I was 34, a judge presiding over high-stakes cases, yet to them, I was the Wells sister who'd never amounted to much. My cousin Lysandra, the only one who knew my secret, lingered nearby, her eyes meeting mine with a silent apology. Years ago, she'd attended my swearing-in as a judge, tears in her eyes as I took the oath. Now, she watched as Aunt Clara asked if I was still single, still at that desk job. I forced a smile, murmuring vague answers, my throat tight with the weight of their pity. Each condolence was a reminder of the lie I'd let grow, the one that kept me safe but small. I sipped my champagne, the bubbles sharp against my tongue, and wondered how I'd become so good at disappearing. These were my family, the people who should have known me best, yet they saw only the shadow I'd allowed them to see, a shadow shaped by years of staying quiet to avoid outshining the sister they adored. Then Isolde arrived, and the world seemed to pause. She swept into the backyard, her designer dress shimmering under the lights, her diamond ring catching every eye. Gideon Carver, her fiancé, walked beside her, tall and reserved, a 38-year-old defense attorney with a quiet intensity. The crowd parted, their murmurs turning to gasps of admiration. Isolde waved, her smile radiant, as if she were royalty gracing us with her presence. "Everyone," she called, her voice carrying over the quartet, "this is Gideon, youngest partner at Carver & Stone. He just won a $10 million case." Applause erupted, and Gideon nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd. I stood by the drink station, unnoticed, but my pulse quickened. I'd never met Gideon, but I knew him. He'd argued cases in my courtroom, his sharp arguments echoing in my memory. As Isolde paraded Gideon around, I overheard her talking to a cousin. "Serafina never had the drive to make it big," she said, her tone laced with pity. "She's content fetching coffee, bless her heart." Lysandra, standing nearby, shot me a look, her jaw tight. I gripped my glass, the words sinking like stones. Isolde's jab wasn't new, but it stung deeper here, surrounded by people who believed her version of me. I sipped my champagne, steadying myself, the judge and me rising, waiting. That night, I was still Serafina, the quiet sister, but something inside me was shifting, a truth long buried beginning to stir, ready to break free. The dinner table stretched across the patio, bathed in the soft glow of twinkling lights, a perfect stage for Isolde's triumph. Plates clinked, wine glasses sparkled, and the hum of conversation wrapped around us like a warm blanket. I sat between my grandmother, her frail hand resting on mine, and a cousin who barely knew my name, feeling like a guest in my own family story. Isolde and Gideon held court at the table's center, their laughter drawing every eye. My parents, Thaddeus and Cornelia, beamed, their pride a tangible thing, reserved for the daughter who'd always been their star. Then my father stood, his glass raised, his voice thick with emotion. "To Isolde and Gideon," he said, "two brilliant souls chasing greatness. We're so proud of you both." The table erupted in applause, glasses clinking, smiles all around. Proud. That word hung in the air, sharp and heavy, a word I'd rarely heard from myself. I glanced at my mother, hoping for a flicker of that pride to land on me, but her eyes were fixed on Isolde, radiant in her designer dress. I'd spent the day arranging those glasses, polishing that silver, but no toast was raised for me. At 34, a judge who'd shaped lives with my rulings, I was still the quiet one, my contributions as invisible as ever. I sipped my wine, the bitterness on my tongue mirroring the ache in my chest, wondering if this night would be another chapter in my family's story where I played no part. Isolde stood, her movements graceful, commanding the table's attention like a conductor before an orchestra. The string quartet faded, and all eyes turned to her, her diamond ring catching the light, a beacon of her success. "Gideon has news," she said, her voice bright with excitement, though her glance at me held a flicker of something sharper. "He just won a landmark case against Bradford Pharmaceuticals, a 7-figure settlement that's making headlines." The table gasped, then burst into applause, murmurs of "incredible" and "so talented" rippling through the crowd. Gideon nodded, his smile modest, but I saw the tension in his jaw, the weight of a man used to high stakes. My heart thudded. That case, I knew it intimately. I'd presided over it, my rulings shaping its path, my gavel sealing its outcome. But here, at this table, no one knew that Judge Serafina Wells had held that power. I remembered the trial's final day, the courtroom thick with anticipation, Gideon's closing argument sharp and compelling. I'd granted his motion, my voice steady, my authority unquestioned. Now, hearing Isolde claim his victory as her own trophy, a quiet anger stirred. She basked in the praise, her eyes scanning the table, landing on me for a moment, as if daring me to speak. I stayed silent, my fingers tight around my glass, the secret I'd carried for 8 years burning hotter. This wasn't just a celebration, it was a sold stage, and I was expected to stay in the wings, my role reduced to clapping for her glory, my truth buried beneath her spotlight. The applause for Gideon faded, but Isolde wasn't done. Her gaze found me, her smile curving into something colder, more deliberate. "Not everyone's cut out for big careers, though," she said, her voice loud enough to draw every eye. "Some people are meant for quieter roles, support roles, right, Serafina?" The table fell silent, forks pausing mid-air, faces turning toward me. "Fetching coffee for 8 years, running errands for some judge, that's honest work, isn't it?" Her laugh was light, almost playful, but it sliced through me, sharp and precise. The air grew heavy, the weight of every stare pressing down. I felt my grandmother's hand tighten on mine, a small anchor in the storm. Isolde leaned back, sipping her wine, her eyes challenging me to respond. Then Gideon, his brow furrowed, spoke up. "Which firm are you with, Serafina?" His question was polite, curious, but it hung in the silence like a spark. Isolde laughed again, cutting him off. "Oh, Gideon, she's not with a firm. She's at the courthouse, filing papers, answering phones, right, Serafina?" The table shifted uncomfortably, some guests looking away, others murmuring agreement, their pity palpable. My cousin Lysandra, who knew my secret, caught my eye, her face tense, urging me to speak. I thought of the last family dinner, when Isolde had bragged about her promotion, dismissing my vague job description with a smirk. Now, her words echoed that night, but louder, crueler, a public dismantling of the sister she'd always outshone. My throat burned, years of silence pressing against my chest. I could have stayed quiet, let her mockery pass, as I had so many times before. But something snapped, a spark of anger, of pride, of the judge who'd faced down hardened criminals without flinching. I met Isolde's gaze, my heart pounding, knowing this moment would change everything. Her smile faltered, just for a second, as if she sensed the shift, the truth I'd kept locked away for 8 years rising to the surface. Isolde's laughter echoed in my ears, but my mind flashed to a courtroom months ago, where I'd sat on the bench, my robes heavy with responsibility. Gideon Carver stood before me, arguing a motion in the Bradford case, his voice steady, his logic sharp. "Your Honor," he'd said, "the evidence supports dismissal." I'd granted his motion, my ruling crisp, my authority absolute. In that moment, I was Judge Serafina Wells, not the coffee girl my sister mocked. Back at the table, Gideon's puzzled look told me he was piecing it together, the judge he'd faced now sitting across from him, unrecognized in a cocktail dress. Another memory surfaced, a late-night session in my chambers, reviewing Gideon's filings, struck by his precision. I'd noted his name, never imagining he'd be my sister's fiancé. Now, Isolde's voice pulled me back, her mockery ringing. "What do you do all day, Serafina? Organize the judge's calendar?" The table chuckled nervously, but Gideon's eyes narrowed, his confusion deepening. My pulse raced, the weight of 8 years of silence crashing down. I'd hidden my truth to keep the peace, to avoid Isolde's envy, my parents' disbelief. But her words, her laughter, her assumption that I was nothing, they lit a fire I couldn't smother. I thought of every case I'd ruled on, every life I'd touched, every night I'd spent building a career no one here knew. My hand trembled around my glass, but my voice was steady, waiting. I met Isolde's gaze, her smile still sharp, unaware that the truth I'd buried was about to break free, a gavel poised to strike. "Judge," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The word landed heavy, a single syllable that stopped the world. Isolde's smile froze, her wine glass hovering mid-air. The table fell utterly still, forks clattering, breaths held. Gideon's eyes widened, recognition flooding his face. "Judge Wells," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. Eastern District Court? I nodded, my gaze steady, the weight of 8 years lifting with that one word. Isolde's laughter broke, sharp and desperate. That's absurd, she snapped. She's lying, Gideon, trying to steal my night. Her voice cracked, her confidence unraveling. Gideon shook his head, his tone firm. I've argued in her courtroom 6 times. The Bradford case was hers. The table gasped, murmurs rippling like waves. My grandmother's hand squeezed mine, her eyes shining with pride. Isolde's face paled, her accusation crumbling under the weight of Gideon's certainty. My cousin Lysandra, who'd kept my secret, let out a soft breath, her relief palpable. I thought of my swearing in, Lysandra's tears as I took the oath, a moment my family had missed. Now, the truth stood bare, no longer mine to hide. My parents, Thaddeus and Cornelia, stared, their pride for Isolde replaced by shock. I'd spent years dimming my light, fearing it would cast their star into shadow. But in that moment, I was no longer the coffee girl, the quiet sister. I was Judge Seraphina Wells, and the truth I'd carried for 8 years had finally spoken, its echo louder than any applause Isolde had ever received. Isolde's face crumpled, her composure shattering like glass. You're stealing my spotlight, she hissed, her voice raw with fury, as if my truth was a deliberate attack on her night. She threw her napkin onto the table, the sharp motion silencing the murmurs around us. Her eyes, wild with betrayal, locked on mine for a fleeting moment before she turned and stormed toward the house, her heels clicking against the patio stones. Gideon hesitated, his gaze shifting between me and the door, torn between loyalty and shock. I'll talk to her, he murmured, his voice low, almost apologetic, before following her into the darkness. The table sat frozen, the air thick with unease, as if the world had tilted off its axis. I watched Isolde's silhouette vanish, her exit a mirror of a childhood tantrum when I'd won a school award she coveted. Back then, she'd slammed her bedroom door, now, she'd left me to face the wreckage. My cousin Lysandra, who'd known my secret, reached for my hand under the table, her touch a silent lifeline. The guests avoided my eyes, their whispers rising like a tide, speculating, judging. I felt exposed, raw, as if I'd shed a skin I'd worn for years. Isolde's anger wasn't new, but its public display cut deeper, a wound that bled years of rivalry and unspoken hurts. I sat there, the judge who'd faced down criminals, now trembling under the weight of my sister's wrath, wondering if the truth I'd unleashed was worth this fracture, this moment where our family's fragile balance broke apart. The silence broke as my mother, Cornelia, let out a soft sob, her hands covering her face. Why didn't you tell us, Seraphina? She asked, her voice trembling, as if my secret was a betrayal of her love. My father, Thaddeus, leaned back in his chair, his face pale, stunned. An actual judge, he said, the words heavy, like he was seeing me for the first time. Around the table, relatives stirred, their reactions a chaotic mix. Aunt Clara, flustered, stammered, I thought you were a secretary, dear. Uncle Roland cleared his throat, mumbling, no shame in honest work, his earlier pity now tinged with embarrassment. My grandmother, her eyes bright, squeezed my hand. I always knew you were special, she whispered, her voice a balm against the chaos. A distant cousin, unaware of the tension, clapped me on the back, saying, well, damn, Seraphina, that's incredible. His enthusiasm clashed with the table's unease, amplifying the awkwardness. The whispers grew louder, some guests congratulating me, others exchanging glances, as if my revelation had rewritten their understanding of our family. Cornelia's tears stung most, she'd celebrated Isolde's every step but missed mine entirely. I wanted to comfort her, to explain, but the words stuck in my throat. For 8 years, I'd hidden my truth to keep their world intact, but now it lay in pieces, and their shock felt like a mirror of my own. I'd expected relief in this moment, but instead, I felt the weight of their confusion, their hurt, as if my silence had wounded them as much as their neglect had wounded me. I looked at my parents, their faces etched with shock, and something inside me broke free, a voice I'd silenced for years. Isolde was always your star, I said, my voice steady but laced with pain. My law degree, my cases, my bench, did any of it ever matter to you? Cornelia's eyes widened, her tears spilling over, but she didn't answer. Thaddeus opened his mouth, then closed it, his silence louder than any words. The table fell quiet, guests shifting uncomfortably, witnessing a truth too raw for this glittering night. I thought of every family dinner where Isolde's promotions drowned out my quiet pride, every milestone I'd celebrated alone. I remembered my first day as a judge, standing in my chambers, heart pounding with purpose, wishing I could call them and hear their pride. Instead, I'd called Lysandra, who'd cheered through the phone. Now, facing my parents, I saw their guilt, their struggle to reconcile the daughter they'd overlooked with the judge I'd become. I hid it to keep the peace, I said, softer now, but I was tired of being invisible. Cornelia reached for me, but I pulled back, not ready for her touch. The confrontation wasn't vengeance, it was release, a shedding of the girl who'd dimmed her light to fit their world. I stood, my chair scraping against the patio, and walked toward the oak trees lining the yard, their shadows offering refuge. The truth was out, but its cost was heavy, a fracture in our family that I hadn't foreseen, a wound that would take time to heal. I drove home alone, the city lights blurring through my windshield, a kaleidoscope of colors against the night. The weight of the evening pressed on my chest, Isolde's fury, my parents' shock, the guests' whispers. For 8 years, I'd carried my secret like a shield, protecting myself from their judgment, their indifference. Now, it was gone, and I felt both free and unmoored, like a ship cut loose in a storm. Had I broken our family, or had I finally claimed my place in it? The question echoed, unanswered, in the hum of the engine. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, a text from Lysandra, "You finally stood up. Proud of you." Her words were a spark in the darkness, a reminder that someone had seen me, even when I'd hidden. I thought of my courtroom, where my rulings were final, my voice unquestioned, and how different it felt here, where my truth had shaken the people I loved. The road stretched ahead, empty and quiet, mirroring the uncertainty in my heart. I'd spent years proving my worth to myself, building a life my family couldn't touch. But tonight, I'd wanted them to see it, to know the woman I'd become. Instead, I'd left them reeling, and the victory felt hollow. As the city skyline loomed, I wondered what came next, reconciliation or distance, healing or more pain. The truth had set me free, but freedom came with a price, one I'd pay in the days ahead, navigating a family forever changed by a single word, judge. The morning after the party, my apartment felt too quiet, the echoes of last night's chaos still ringing in my mind. Then came a knock, Gideon, standing at my door, his lawyer's polish replaced by a weary honesty. He sat across from me, his hands clasped, and spoke words that shifted my view of Isolde. "She's not a marketing director," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "She's a mid-level manager. She lied to feel bigger, to match the image everyone expects." I wasn't shocked. I'd spent years hiding my own truth, a judge masquerading as a coffee girl to avoid outshining her. Gideon's eyes met mine, a silent acknowledgement of our shared secrets. He told me about Isolde's late-night tears, her fear of never being enough despite the applause she chased. It mirrored my own childhood, always striving to be seen. I thought of a case I'd judged, a woman who'd lied about her credentials, driven by shame. I'd shown her mercy, seeing her humanity. Now, I saw Isolde's. Gideon's visit wasn't just an apology, it was a bridge, a chance to understand the sister I'd envied and resented. I thanked him, my voice soft, feeling the first crack in the wall between us. For years, I'd judged Isolde harshly, but now I saw her fragility, her own shadows. My secret had protected me, but it had also kept us apart, two sisters hiding behind facades. As Gideon left, I felt a spark of hope, a possibility that truth could mend what it had broken, if we were brave enough to try. Days later, Isolde came to my apartment, her eyes red, her usual confidence stripped away. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice breaking, not with anger but with hurt. I sat across from her, my heart heavy. "Would it have mattered?" I said. "I thought you were their favorite." She laughed, a bitter sound. "And I thought you were." The words hung between us, raw and real, exposing years of misunderstanding. We'd both felt unseen, chasing love in a family that pitted us against each other. We talked for hours, unraveling decades of rivalry, finding common ground in our pain. Months later, I started mentoring young lawyers, sharing lessons I'd learned the hard way. One associate, shy but sharp, asked how I found my confidence. "I didn't, for years," I admitted. "I hid my light, fearing it would dim others." "Don't make that mistake." Her eyes lit up, and I saw myself in her, the quiet girl who'd stood in Isolde's shadow. Mentoring gave me purpose, a way to turn my pain into something meaningful. Isolde and I weren't fixed overnight, but our coffee meetings became a ritual, tentative steps toward sisterhood. I recalled a childhood memory, us building a fort, giggling as equals before rivalry took hold. Now, we were rebuilding, not a fort, but trust. The judge in me knew justice required mercy, and I offered it to Isolde, to myself. Hiding had cost us years, truth was our chance to start again, not as rivals, but as sisters learning to share the light. Isolde and Gideon postponed their wedding, choosing honesty over appearances. We meet for coffee now, our conversations cautious but growing warmer, like spring after a long winter. My parents, Thaddeus and Cornelia, call more often, their voices tinged with regret, trying to know the daughter they overlooked. Family dinners feel different, less about Isolde's triumphs, more about listening, healing. Last week, my mother asked about a case I'd ruled on, her curiosity genuine, a small step toward seeing me. I learned hiding my light served no one, not me, not them. Truth, even when it stings, clears the way for something real. I think of my courtroom, where I weigh evidence, seeking fairness. Life's messier, but the principle holds, honesty lays the foundation for justice, for love. Isolde and I aren't perfect, but we're learning to be sisters, not stars competing for the sky. I carry that lesson forward, in court and at home, knowing my worth isn't tied to their applause. Truth set me free, and now, it's guiding us toward a family we might finally belong to, together. Have you ever dimmed your light to make others comfortable? I did, for 8 years, hiding my truth as a judge to keep my family's fragile balance intact. That night at Isolde's engagement party, when her mockery pushed me to speak, I learned a hard lesson: silence protects no one. My sister and I were rivals, caught in a dance of envy and misunderstanding, but revealing my truth broke that cycle. We're not perfect, Isolde and I still stumble, but we're learning to be sisters, not competitors. In my courtroom, I seek justice through truth. At home, I found it's the same. Hiding my achievements only deepened our divide. Now, I carry a new strength, knowing my worth isn't tied to their applause. If you've ever felt unseen, know this: your light matters, and it's never too late to let it shine. If my story struck a chord, you're not alone. Have you ever hidden your success to avoid outshining someone you love? Or felt overshadowed by a sibling, a friend, a colleague? I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Your voice deserves to be heard, just as mine finally was. Hit that like button if this resonated, and subscribe to join me on this journey of finding our truths. Tap the bell so you don't miss what's next: stories of courage, of breaking free from shadows. Let's build a community where we lift each other up, where no one has to hide to feel enough. I used to think staying small kept the peace, but it only kept me silent. Your comments, your stories, they're a reminder we're stronger when we share who we truly are. Let's start that conversation now. Next time, I'll dive into my toughest case yet, one that tested me in the courtroom and at home, where family ties were stretched to the breaking point. It's a story of choices, consequences, and finding balance when everything feels at stake. Thanks for watching, for staying with me through this raw, real journey. As I walk into court each day, I carry a truth I learned the hard way: you don't have to shrink for anyone. Your story, your strength, it's enough. Until next time, keep shining, keep speaking. This is Serafina Wells, signing off, grateful for you.